All right, so we're on lab 13, lucky lab 13. In the material for test 2, there is still, I think, 2 labs. We want to do the concept of session and the concept of cookie. So session and cookie, and then I think we're done with just Flask. Well, not just Flask, but Flask and Python. So we started, the first test was just Python, then it's Python and Flask. And then the third is Python, Flask, and we'll add in SQL. So we'll start connecting to a database. So that's what's on the horizon. At some point, we have 3 tests. The third test is just, it's in the finals week, but well, it's just really a third test. It's weighted the same. We have the labs and the homework, and then there's also a project, but the project will be sort of a database thing. So once we get into the database, then I'll post, here are the criteria for the project. Okay. And it's usually just sort of maybe the equivalent of like 2 labs in terms of amount of stuff in it. And it's just that you come up with the idea rather than me. So like the database will be a database that you design and you put some data in. Okay, so that's coming. So next week, before break, we will probably finish the material for the second test. And then you'll have spring break, and then you'll have like a week at least to ask me questions. So not the week after spring break, but probably maybe in the second week after spring break, that might be the time that we have test 2, which will involve the Flask stuff. So again, if you've been dragging your feet, then you need to get your environment set up. That is not trivial. And to you online people, remember that when you come in, you can't just take any seat. There is some setup. Some people are set up in the computers that they use in class on a regular basis. And they get the priority of being at that machine where they've set things up. You're allowed to bring your own device, so you can set up on a laptop and use it. You can use 2 computers. You just can't use anybody else's computer. So you have to, make sure you're not sitting in somebody's regular seat. Okay. I'll ask, as I always do, are there any questions for up here for the recording? No. Okay. So we have used Flask and then added WTF to Flask to make forms and interact with the user. And we have been sort of hard coding the choices. We've said like, oh, here I'm going to choose colors, and the color choices are red, blue, and green. And we're going to bring in some files now where we'll read a file and we'll use that file to make the choices and then design the interface with those choices and respond to the interface to whatever choices the user made. Okay, so WTF is WT forms, and we are adding in the idea of JSON. Okay, so I'm copying these files. I have a static, which will have some data, template, which will have my HTMs, my 2 Pythons, copying that, and I'm pasting it into, where am I, 341, Flask 2, the virtual environment, and that's where I'm pasting that in. Okay. And I will probably, on the test, I may have at least there may be, last time there were, I don't know, like 6 things I had you do. Now it's going to be more like 2 because these are longer. But there may be one where I give you a bunch of stuff. So you have to know where to place it. So, and again, I give you stuff, you give me what I gave you when you're submitting a work. And so please make sure you never give me the scripts folder, because then I'll get, one, it's big and it takes a long time for you to send it, for me to receive it, and then IT yells at both of us. So, okay. And again, with the test coming up, and maybe not next week, not the break week, not the first week after break, but the second week after break. So I don't know, it's almost a month away or something, 3 weeks or so. But anyway, there is a test coming. And again, there are lots of files to balance in here. And if you're trying to figure out that, as well as the code on the day of the test, you're going to fall on your face. How do I know? Because last semester when I taught this, a bunch of people fell on their face. So, all right, so what do I need? My Visual Studio Code. I'm going to open the folder. And it's 341, Flask 2, virtual environment. That's what I'm opening. And what did I send over? Forms FG. So again, I'm still working with the sort of Five Guys kind of stuff. So Forms FG. Okay. And let me do that. Okay. So I've got this is the Five Guys. So we've got the submit button at the bottom to sort of say that's the hamburger I want. I've got the radio buttons for the hamburgers and what level of cooked I want. I have the select, multiple field, and the widgets that combined gives me checkboxes. I have the individual Boolean field that gave me the single checkbox for, I think it was Cajun fries. Do you want Cajun fries? Yes or no. I had the hidden field, so that's the way I could send the information about the price of the Cajun fries. And I had the input required for like the radio button things, that you had to choose a hamburger, you had to choose a burger, and you had to choose a level of cooking, and you had to choose yes or no whether you wanted regular fries. Okay. Here something new. I'm adding in JSON. I'm going to read a JSON file, and I'm doing the, not sure I needed this because I think I'm working within, no, I sort of set up the operating system stuff, and here I'm opening the data file. It's in static, it's in data, it's called Five Guys JSON. So I should show that. So let me bring back my Explorer. Let me close templates for now. I have static, and this says in static, in data, there's a Five Guys JSON. In static, in data, there's a Five Guys JSON. It starts with a curly. So let me use my Python language, that's a dictionary. It has a property burgers, which is a list, and it's a list of dictionaries, and the burgers have a name and a price. And that's all there is in this file. Sometimes I have more stuff in the file, but that's all I have in this file. Okay. So I am reading that file and parsing the JSON. Okay. One thing I remind you, some people got, and it is an easy thing to confuse. There's a one-line sort of read a JSON file and parse it right away, and then you say load. And then, or you can read in the file and then parse it, and then it's loads, because the S stands for a string. So if you bring in a string and then parse it, you use loads. If you do it in one line where you're parsing a file, then you say load. but in this case, I read it and then parsed it, so it's loads. Okay. Now, let's go down and look to what we're used to, and then I'll go up and show you the new part. So here are the burgers. Here are the, let's look at the levels of cooking. This is the normal stuff that we've seen before. RadioField, I say, here's my label, burger type. And then I say, here are my choices. I don't know why I call it burger type. I should probably call it level of cooking or doneness or something. But let me do it instead of just say it done. I'll call it doneness. Okay, but here's what we're used to seeing. Here's the choices, which is a list, square bracket, of tuples, parentheses, and what the user sees and what's behind the scenes. And in the case of the levels of cooking, it's the same. And then the input was required, and I did the sort of no bullet thing. Okay, now burgers is what I've changed. And instead of having here a choice and having hard-coded a list of tuples, I'm going to get the list of tuples from the JSON file I read. So let me go up. So that's what this code does here, is it's making the list of tuples. So the set of choices for what the user can choose is a list of tuples. So I'm taking my JSON and I'm going to make a list of tuples out of that. Okay. So here's my list to start off with, burger underscore choices. That's my list. So it's equal to empty square brackets for now. I'm announcing that it's a list, and then I will supply the list. I am, let's look at the Five Guys data. FG underscore data is the JSON file. Let's look at the JSON file. That's what some, not all of you, have a problem with, is looking at the JSON file to see what structure the JSON file has. The JSON file is a dictionary with a property that is an array, or sorry, is a list. Okay, so I'm here in 20, I'm doing a for loop. And so I loop over a list, and it's FG underscore data is not the list. F underscore data square bracket burgers, that's the list. Okay, you have to look at the JSON file to know whether the JSON file is from the beginning a list, or whether it's a dictionary with a list in it, or sometimes there might be no lists at all. But okay, so FG underscore data burgers, that's a list. I can loop over that. I call the element of the array burg. That's just a sort of a dummy name for the purposes of iteration. And that happens to be a dictionary. Okay, I start off, now you remember that my choices are a list of tuples. Here's my list. And so you think that in the loop, I'm making tuples, and I will, but first I have to make a list and then turn it into a tuple. I can append, I'm going to add some things I want to append, and append belongs to list, but not tuple. So I make a list and I append some things to it, then I sort of downcast it to a tuple and add that tuple to the overall list. It's a weird ballet of types to get the types right. So I'm making this little list inside my loop. Here's the big list I ultimately want, burger choices. I make a little temporary list, also an empty list. And now here I am going to append to it. So I am making, the first item is going to be the name of the burger and the price of the burger. So my Five Guys had these dictionaries, had a name property and a price property. And so my first thing I'm making is a name and a vertical bar and a price so that I can parse it. This is what gets passed. The first thing in my tuple is the thing that gets passed behind the scenes. And I want both pieces of information. I want the name and the price, and I want there to be some delimiter so I can split it. Okay. I look up every once in a while thinking maybe you'll have a question. Okay, so that's the first thing I am making. And then the second thing I'm making is just the name of the burger. That's what the user's going to see. So I'm making what I'm going to pass behind the scenes, and then I'm making what the user's going to see, and they are added to my list, and then my list is converted to a tuple. And then my tuple is appended to my overall list. So overall, I've made a list of tuples. And then I'm printing it out to see that I have what I think I have. And then the choices of instead of hard coding the choices, I'm getting the choices from the code above, which came from the file. So this seems like a lot of work. Wasn't this simpler? Well, now they add another burger. It's they add a tofu burger or an impossible burger or whatever the hell people want kind of burger. And then do you want, as a coder, to have to come in and hard code the new choice into your code? No, you want to just say to some lower person, edit that JSON file, add the thing to the JSON file. That's far easier thing to do. You don't have to pay that person who can edit a JSON file as much as the person who can edit a sort of a Python Flask program. So, okay, so that's why we do the extra work to get the information from a file, because then it's easier to change. All right. And that was the only change, because then that information gets passed over to the app_fg, and that just does the routes. And then that information, that page announces that there's FG form and FG form handler, and they're the same as they were before. So they're in templates. And that just says, don't forget this token, but that just says there's a burger and a level and toppings and fries. And I dropped the Cajun fries, so there are no Cajun fries anymore. That's okay. And then here is the handler. Okay, so the big thing was the burger choices are now coming from a JSON file. Okay, so let's run the sucker. Not lab 8, that was somebody else's lab. What am I looking up? It's app FG, that's what I'm running. Oops. app_fg Flask run. Click on the URL, control click, and I want a cheeseburger, well done, with, no, I don't like mayonnaise, mushroom and onions. And do I want fries with that? I'll say yes. Probably should have had a blank line in here or something. And there's my cheeseburger, well done, mushrooms and onions. That was 2 toppings. And I had an order of fries, and that was 1068 altogether. Okay. So we had most of this, we're just slowly building up. So the most current recent addition was to get the choices of the burgers from a JSON file. Questions? All right. So one more level, and then I turn it over to you. Okay, so I am always yelling at you to make sure you know what's in the JSON file, and then I'm going to try to make this a little more generic, not completely generic, but a little more generic, so that it can handle, more situations. Okay. So I'm trying to generalize it a bit. Stop that. Download. Let me just re-download. There it is. Extract. Copy. 341 Flask 2 VENV paste. And you can see that I am writing over files in the same VENV. I can make different name files all the time. That's also possible. I had a student in the fall who was making a new VENV like every time, and that's not necessary. I've got about 3 or 4 VENVs so that I can have my stuff and your stuff separated, so I can test your stuff and not lose my stuff. But so there are reasons to have multiple VENVs. That's the purpose of a VENV, is to have different environments, to install different things, or to have separate locations that are safe from each other. But it's not necessary that every little project you make needs a new virtual environment. And that one file's big and it takes up room. And so don't kill your machines with copying that, having that script folder over and over and over again. Okay. So I think I brought it over. All right. That's the APPY. There's nothing interesting there. It's the forms that has the new stuff. Okay. So here is this big comment was my old thing that we just looked at for the most part. So you can see here, I made the list, I made the little sub list, I concatenated, I sort of appended, made a burger price and appended it, made just a burger, and then turned the list into a tuple and added the tuple to the overall list. Now let's just make it a little bit more generic. And so I have this thing called tuple list maker, and I'm going to send it a dictionary list. And so over here, I have to make burger choices, and I go to FG burgers. And for the level choices, I go to FG levels. So now there's a new there's a new data file. I should show you that. Five Guys JSON has burgers and levels. It's more complicated than that because burgers have a name, an abbreviation, and a price. So I had 3 properties, 3 name value pairs that define a burger dictionary. And then in my levels, I just have 1 property, the name. I could have other properties here. How long should you cook it for it to be rare or medium or something? But I just want to make them different. So I have 2. Overall, my object has 2 properties. Each property is a list of dictionaries, but those dictionaries are different. Okay. So I want this more generic thing. Okay. So I write one function, one method that handles both the burgers and the level choices. So I send it, I'm sending it a list of dictionaries in both cases. So the type of thing I'm sending it, a list of dictionaries, that's the same. But what's in the dictionaries is different. And I want to just adjust to whatever they've sent. Okay. And I'm going to assume that the first thing they send me is what I want to show the user. And I'm going to send them all the information behind the scenes, but I'm going to show them, but what I'm going to show the user is the first piece of information. So I do have that additional structure in here. So it's not as completely generic as it could be, but it's fairly generic. So I'm sending in a dictionary list, a list of dictionaries. What I want out of it is the choices, which is a list of tuples. So the result is my list of tuples. That's what I will return in the function when I'm done. So this result is ultimately what I want, which will be a list of tuples. Now remember that I've sent it a dictionary list. So I sent this function, not the overall JSON, but a property within the JSON that happens to be a list of dictionaries. And so now what I call dict_list, that is a list of dictionaries, so I can loop over it. And I called the element of the list, I called it item. That's just my dummy name for the sake of iteration. I'm playing the same game I played before in that I want to add things, and ultimately I want a tuple, but append doesn't work for a tuple, append works for a list. So I'm making this little sub thing a list to begin with. And this thing is creating a vertical bar delimited string with all of the properties of the dictionary. So my burgers, it was hamburger HB 619. So I want it to be hamburger vertical bar HB vertical bar 619. That's what this is doing. Okay, so that's a very compressed line of code. In Python, it drives me crazy, but it's the way Python does it. I'm used to, in other languages, it being some kind of list, dot join, and then the delimiter. I'm used to I'm used to join belonging to a list. But in Python, the join belongs to a string, and then the argument is the list. So that seems backwards to me, but that's the way Python does it. And we've seen that before. So here is my delimiter dot join. And then this is remember that I called the dictionary item. If I have a dictionary and I say dot values, that gives me the properties. And so I'm getting the element of the values, and that's what I am, and I'm forcing it to be a string. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a string, but I'm forced to cast it as a string, so then I can join it, and I'm joining them with a vertical bar. So again, that's a very compressed line of code, but that's going to say hamburger vertical bar, HB vertical bar, 619 vertical. No, only vertical bars between. So hamburger vertical bar, HB vertical bar, 619. Stop. And then I append that to my list. Then I'm saying here, give me the 0th item, the first item. So go to the item's values, make it a list, give me the first one. It's very back and forth with types. So, I probably pulled my hair that I don't have out trying to get the types right. It was very, oh no, I want, and remember that Python has something where you can look at something's type. So when you're working through something like this, you say, what is the type of the thing that I have? Oh, it's a tuple and I want a list. Oh, it's a list and I want a tuple. So item is the dictionary. I am getting the values of the dictionary. I'm converting it to a list and grabbing the first one. So that is just the name, which is hamburger. Down here, the first item is the only item, and it's rare. Okay. Then when I get that, I add that to the list, which is a tuple. Then I cast that. Sorry, that is a list. Yes. So I make my one string with the vertical bar delimiter and add it to my list. And I make the second one, which is just the first item, and add it to my list. And then I cast my list as a tuple, and I add my tuple to my overall list result. Okay. Now, the good thing is, do you have to duplicate this? No, you're allowed to use it because you just copy it, but I do want you to understand it. Okay. And so this just made check boxes. We've seen that. Here are my burgers. And when I called my function, I called the result burger choices. So my choices are burger choices. When I called it to make the tuples for the levels, I called it level choices. There's the choices are the level choices. And that's what's changed, except now there is a change in the handler because I changed now to 3 things. If you recall, for the burgers, I now have 3 name value pairs. And so I had to adapt my handler to grab the name and work with the name and the price. And I'm probably skipping over the abbreviation, or maybe I'm. So the handler may have changed. Let's look at the handler. Okay, so here's the split now in the handler. There's the burger name and the abbreviation and the burger price. And then I split it on the vertical bar. And I get the price as a float, and I'm printing out the burger name, but I'm not doing anything with the abbreviation, though I could, because I have that piece of information. So let's Control C. Let's run this. Control click. And here we are. So I want bacon cheeseburger, medium with mustard. That sounds disgusting. And I'll skip the fries if I'm going to have bacon. And order. Okay. So that was all the game. Again, today's topic is getting the choices from a file so that you can add, somebody else can add choices just by editing the file without editing the code. That's the point of this. All right. What do you have to do? Okay. So somebody's going to order a sundae. They're going to be radio buttons. This will be radio buttons because they choose a number of scoops. So they can't choose both 2 and 3 scoops. They choose one amount of scoops. But oops. And then there are the flavors. And I think they'll choose one flavor. There are toppings. They can choose more than one topping, so that will be check boxes. And you have to make a JSON file. So this has 2 properties, the number of scoops and the price. Whereas the flavors have maybe just one property, the toppings might just have one property. But you have to make, I'm asking you to make the JSON. You should, if you're going to ever make your own file, data file, especially if it's got a complicated structure like JSON, then you should validate it. Because if you're trying to read JSON and it's not good JSON, then all just goes to hell. So one of the standard, you just put in JSON validator. One of the standard ones is called JSON lint, and just check that your JSON is good JSON. Then your WT Forms is going to read the JSON and make the option. So it's going to get the scoop options and the flavor options, and the topping options are all going to come from your JSON file. And then you are going to find out how many scoops they want, what ice cream they want, what toppings they want, and you're going to add money for every topping they want. So, any questions? I'll stop recording.